So ladies, gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new news roundup video, and today's one has me very, very happy because there's a certain story or two that dropped over the weekend that I was too busy to get to, but I did upload my Superman in-depth trailer breakdown on Friday, which you should definitely check out if you haven't done so already. But today is very, very promising news if you're a fan of The Batman and are looking forward to The Batman Part 2. So diving straight into this story, ladies and gentlemen, let's go over it from the beginning here. So we had a user on Threads ask James Gunn, has there been any encouraging updates on The Batman 2? And he replied, yes. Now, before we get into even more juicy details, I just wanted to talk about this to all the naysayers being like, oh, Gunn's definitely still going to cancel it. He doesn't want competition for his own Batman, the DCU Batman, so, you know, it's like a long game, he's canceling. At this point, don't you think the man would be digging himself like an infinite hole of like bad attention from all the Batman 2 fans out there and God knows who else, if to this day, as of a couple of days ago, he replies to a fan asking for any and all kinds of update on part 2, and he says, yes, there has been some encouraging updates behind the scenes. As Gunn said before, you may call me foolish for believing him here, but as he said before, like at this point, who wants to play charades? You know, if we wanted to cancel it, we would have canceled it. Now we're getting into some more juicy details because Gunn is saying, yes, there's been some promising updates. And at around the same time, we had a brand new article, an exclusive from The Wrap. What's going on with Matt Reeves' The Batman Part 2 script? So initially in this article, they go over some of the most recent acknowledgement officially from Gunn and Safran, saying, James and I, we love Matt Reeves' vision for The Batman Part 2, and we're looking forward to this film as much as you are. He hasn't yet turned in the script, but what we've read so far is very encouraging. So, The Wrap go and say with brand new information here that according to an insider with knowledge of the project, Reeves has been sending pages for more than half a year, and the first full draft of the script is expected to be delivered by Memorial Day, which is May 26th. Now, technically, half of that isn't brand new news because, again, an old quote, Safran and Gunn said, you know, what we've read so far is very encouraging. We know that Matt Reeves has been sending portions of the script over, just not like a first full draft, if you will, but The Wrap is claiming here that yes, it is expected, the first full draft, by May 26th, which is technically only a few days as of when making this video. Jumping to the chase here of why this is so big for me, and what I've been saying on the channel, and this isn't like I hate to say I told you so, because there is still some caveats I want to mention in just a couple of minutes, is that this is basically my most optimistic take, or what I've said before on the channel, coming to life here. Because despite all the fear-mongering out there, every update we get where we hear that Matt Reeves hasn't handed in the script yet, I've always said, well, technically, guys, if, as per what Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson said publicly, that they aim to start shooting at the end of this year, that would be around November latest, just because you wouldn't really start shooting in December to just kind of halt over the holiday period and then start again in January or whenever it is. I said, let's just say it is November, you take 5 or 6 months off of the November production date to do your pre-production. That takes us back to basically June, July. And I've said, well, on a technicality, Matt Reeves does have until around about that time to hand in the script to then truly start the pre-production phase, which lasts 5 or 6 months, just like the first film. Now, as things were moving along the way, I did get a little bit more, I would say, apprehensive in the sense that with what is going on with Matt Reeves behind the scenes, not that I have really any true fear of the film getting cancelled. However, I was like, okay, pre-production might start a little bit later into the summer, which could mean that they might delay the production date until early next year, which didn't faze me for the movie's release date, because even if they started production, not November, but sometime early 2026, this still means they can easily get the film out by October 2027. So here we are now, and we're hearing not only, sure, like you may be like, oh, I don't know about The Wrap, claiming that there should be a draft of the script handed in to James Gunn DC Studios by Memorial Day, May 26th. But you also had Gunn come out at the same time saying, yes, there's been some encouraging updates on The Batman Part 2. So if you read between the lines here, it's kind of as I've been saying with my most optimistic take, in how I said to everyone, guys, I know you're saying, oh, the script's never going to be done. oh, it's too late or whatever. No, I said that he had time to technically finish the draft of the script, which should be his final draft. And now we're hearing that that might be done in just a few days' time. So I guess now you might ask me, Boba, does this mean they're actually going to start filming towards the end of this year? That is something that, all while technically, if they have all their ducks in a row, they could maybe achieve, maybe. There are still a few things up in the air, obviously, where I don't have the absolute confidence to say that, because things could bleed over to a production start for the Batman Part 2, in all reality, in early 2026. But I still take this as a major silver lining, like huge W, because it's just another acknowledgement that things are going well, and there's no intention to cancel the Batman Part 2 with all that conspiracy theory, fear-mongering that's been out there, like Gunn wanting to cancel it because he doesn't want competition, like all of that crazy stuff. And if the green light goes ahead, as in Gunn's like, yeah, this script is sound, man. Let's ramp up to pre-production now. That will happen over the next 5-6 months. And then, yeah, I guess they need to decide whether they really can cram in shooting. But I think maybe if I was to like play some safe money betting on this, I would say that they will start pre-production this year. They'll start looking into casting and everything like that come the fall of this year. And then maybe production at the very beginning, towards the beginning of 2026. That would be the more realistic one. It would line up with Robert Pattinson doing Dune Messiah, even though he shouldn't be shooting as long as everyone's worried about. You know, if you just want to be safe, yeah, let's get everything prepared for the rest of this year, get our castings underway, and every duck lined up in a row, so to speak, for a proper production date of, let's just say, sometime around February, March of 2026. Film for a good 5 months, have a year of post like the first film, boom, bam, boom, movie's ready to go. Not to mention, by the way, I should have said this a bit sooner, but Apocalyptic Horseman, who's a very good scooper for Nexus Point News, he said, yep, heard this as well, and that he was expected to be done by June. This is why I was never worried. He's very, very close to finishing. The plan is to start casting in July, so hopefully we start getting updates in the summer/early fall. So long story long here, at the end of this big pause, I wanted to give like as comprehensive as I could be, like breakdown to people as to why and what's happened, where we're at. But right now, if you're a fan of the Batman Part 2, this should be the best news you've heard in years, because the ball is now truly starting to roll. And I think that is further solidified by Gunn's Threads response. Because I've said for the past few months, we should be hearing an update with the Batman Part 2, one way or the other, for better or for worse, by July. Absolute latest, because they can't pretend as if they're going to get on with Part 2 like they are, unless we hear something substantial by July. Now, there is still the Matt Reeves situation, because one thing I have said is that I still think the Batman Part 2 would continue. Even if there was, you know, we heard rumors recently of could they be looking to get another director in because of that bloody Production Weekly listing. I've said with what I know about Matt Reeves' personal situation that still wouldn't surprise me, even if that got announced after today's news. Just because Matt Reeves could still work very closely, review dailies, do notes, this, that, and the other, still have written the script for Part 2 that he's handing in supposedly on May 26th. He could have still have done all of this. It's just I've left the door open because if his situation is still very much so demanding his attention in his personal life, he could still do what they did with the Penguin, and where other people wrote that, other people showran that. Do you see what I mean? So the Penguin still felt very Matt Reeves versus DNA. Obviously, we still want Matt Reeves to direct the Batman Part 2, but I'm just saying, if that happened, just on the off chance here, because of what he is going through personally, that many of you have heard about right now, it just wouldn't be surprising. But the good news, whether you want to entertain that whole thing or not, is that Part 2 is very much so looking like it's being loaded into the barrel. It's just taken a while to get there, but it really is kind of going according to my optimistic projections of hearing something around about May, June, July, and it looks like we could hear something fairly soon, or to be honest, this could be it. Like Gunn hinting that, The Wrap posting that exclusive. And you know what, actually, I think if it does get handed in on May 26th and all goes well, like there's no like internal notes or anything like this for Matt Reeves to go back on or with Mattson Tomlin, I could imagine Gunn doing a thing like what they did with Clayface and other projects, saying, absolutely thrilled to announce that Matt Reeves' The Batman Part 2 has been greenlit for pre-production. Roll on the movie for the October 2027 release. That kind of tweet or Instagram post or thread post that he's done in the past. I know this was like a long breakdown for this story in the video, but I felt like it deserved it. And this is great news, even if they're starting production next year and it's not this year. And also, I keep doing this recently. If you're still watching right now, which I hope you are, because that was just the first story, give a like on this video. Really helps your boy out. But now let's move into the realms of Superman. Now, I do want to give a slight spoiler warning, but these toys have been posted everywhere. But you can skip to the next timestamp if you don't want to see any kind of toy listing for Ultraman and Lex Luthor stuff. Long story long, here's your opportunity to skip to the next timestamp. So, here we have a Spin Master toy confirming that this is indeed your boy, Ultra Boy, as in Ultraman. And now I think they did change the title of the toy listing on the Target website, DC Comics Superman Legacy. It's not Superman Legacy anymore, Target. Man Behind the Mask action figure. But on the toy itself, it says DC's Ultraman. So, I mean, to all the Ulysses people out there, what did I tell you? What did I tell you? Now, having said that, I do want to say that this clearly isn't Ultraman from the alternate universe, an evil Superman, a part of the crime syndicate. That's literally who Ultraman is in the comics, if you didn't know already. I've always said, whether it's Ulysses or Ultraman, that this character would likely be influenced by not just one, but maybe multiple characters. That's why people have theorized, under the mask, is there a Corenswet clone, a Superman clone, who's going to degrade like Bizarro? Clearly, that wouldn't be Ultraman in just not only name, but character, would it? So I do think that this character, clearly with the U, that's what I've always said. No matter what, I don't care about the U on Ulysses' freaking suit design. This is an Ultraman U. It always has been. And ever since those leaks back then, I've been saying, yeah, this is like Gunn's Ultraman. No copy and paste from the source material, but some sort of influence. Now we have to see truly who the man is behind the mask. Is it actually a clone of Superman that Lex has somehow managed to do through DNA? I really don't know, but you can see how freaking purple he is here. So he definitely has a purple suit. But we also had another toy released that I covered in my trailer breakdown because it connects to a scene towards the end of the official trailer, and where we see Superman flying in that pocket dimension-y, phantom zone-y kind of place where Lex is seemingly holding prisoners. At least it looks like the same place in where, you know, we have the Hammer of Baravia, Mr. Terrific, and Lois using that kind of Zeta tube transport device to get in there in the first place. It looks like there was this kind of little egghead man releasing heat vision at Superman, and I was thinking, what if that is Lex Luthor going full-on all-star Superman mode, and where he takes the exogene serum to grant him Superman's powers for just a 24-hour period. I really didn't think Gunn's Superman would go there, and of course, by the way, this person over there that you're seeing on screen is very blurry. I don't know that it is Lex in a suit. It could be Ultraman, basically, or I don't know, whoever's in the Hammer of Baravia suit. But here, in this toy that was released, we see that Lex Luthor is in one of the Lex Trooper suits, highlighted a bit more green here and purple with the Under Armour. Now, I am very aware that, you know, toys for previous DC movies include toys that aren't actually even in the movie. However, I don't know, man. I feel like Lex might get to the point of being so frustrated that all of his grand design and plan to take Superman down doesn't work out, so he just he resorts to basically going ham. I'm not very confident about that. It could still be Ultraman or the Hammer of Baravia or someone like that releasing heat vision at the end, but this could also be Lex Luthor in this suit here. We also have Baby Joey there, which could be Joseph Mason, which is Metamorpho's son, and we have Krypto in a little back-to-tank thing. And we also got some new stills for Superman, thanks to Entertainment Weekly and their interview with Nicholas Hoult. I don't want to really read out the whole article because, you know, it's mostly stuff that we've heard them talk about before. He talks about how Lex is driven, saying he's obsessive and determined and relentless, and there's a lot of emotion pushing through all of that in a way. Now, Entertainment Weekly, interestingly, also go on to say here, Gunn described his vision for Luthor as a sorcerer of science, which we've heard before, not necessarily a mad one. Hoult gravitates towards that description, noting the level of ingenuity the character works with is so advanced that it feels like magic. Now, Entertainment Weekly, and I don't know if this is something they learned behind the scenes, but they say, and this isn't a quote from someone, but it's just what they say, he's able to craft unique artillery, some out of kryptonite, a fictional mineral, and Superman's ultimate weakness. Now, this isn't like crazy spoilery because, okay, I'm sure Lex would do that. It's just we didn't know that for a fact that in the movie there's going to be artillery made out of kryptonite, but I guess that there will be, and I think this is maybe what the Hammer of Baravia is equipped with thanks to Luthor, and that's how Superman gets absolutely smashed into the streets in his fight because he hasn't necessarily encountered kryptonite before in this version, which would be a bit of a Superman birthright inspiration, which I go over in my in-depth trailer breakdown. Now, Hoult says that the gadgets and tech that he's working with are beyond those things that we can imagine. He's someone who really worked hard for a long time in terms of science and himself and how he wants to be perceived and his intellect. Even for me, physically in this, I wanted him to feel like he was as much alpha as possible, where he's someone who's, in his mind, done everything he possibly could for himself, but also for humanity in some ways. In his mind, he should be adored. And then this person, this superhuman, this alien, has come along who all those things come naturally to in many ways. That gives him a deep, deep resentment, which is basically Luthor in a nutshell. Now, HBO Max, Warner Brothers, I just got used to calling HBO Max, and now you changed it back. Like, I don't need to cover that whole story, but HBO Max now lists Millie Alcock as a part of the cast for Superman. Now, I do think that this is a little bit of an oopsie. I don't think it was it was a mistake in terms of maybe how they shouldn't have added it, but maybe technically if she's a part of the cast, they kind of maybe have to add it kind of thing. But yes, it really comes at no surprise. I've seen people say, Boba, can you talk about this? We all basically, given that we have Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow coming out next summer, expected Kara to be in this film in some way, shape, or form, even if it's a very small role. And that's because even to her origin story in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, that we're probably going to get a lot more into with flashbacks to Argo City, is that, as Gunn said as well, she was raised off of a chip of a Krypton, which is Argo City, which kind of flew off as Krypton exploded kind of thing. And without giving too much of the story away there, just in case you haven't read it, circumstances happen on Argo where things aren't going that great, and her father sends her off away to Earth, and she arrived on Earth as a teenager. And again, I'm using Gunn's quotes here as well, with just the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow backstory. So technically, Kara, Millie Alcock's Kara, should have arrived to Earth several years or so before Superman picks up, and then technically around the time of Superman, the movie we're going to see soon, she will be going into her 21st birthday, which is basically the setting and time period of when Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, the story kicks off. Now, there's a bit of a mystery as to what happened after that point. Did she meet Clark in the DCU? Does she know him? Because it seems that through David Corenswet describing Krypto as more of a foster situation, well, that tells me that he does know his cousin. And I don't know what Kara's doing during the events of Superman, but she must be doing something, because that adds a good excuse as to why another Kryptonian can't help out with ULTRAMAN or the Hammer of Baravia, right? But she's left Krypto in Superman's care for the period of time that the movie explores. I assume that's what's going on. But yes, this would imply that Kara has met Clark, but she's obviously going through a lot because she's got some PTSD and a half, obviously having been raised like for years and years of her life in Kryptonian culture, compared to her cousin Clark, who was raised basically like a human. Now, this tells me all kinds of other things where we can go down the rabbit hole. Like, well, technically she should have educated him a bit about Krypton, but that would get rid of some other theories that we've had about the movie, with how little Clark perhaps even knows about Krypton that Luthor could reveal to him in a Superman birthright-inspired way with that comic book storyline. But that wouldn't work out, would it? If surely Kara could have told him about stuff. You see where I'm going with this? So technically, all I'm saying is, not a surprise that she's in the movie. I just want to know what she's been doing, as she's probably around 20 at this point, but she would have arrived on Earth a few years back. We've also even explored theories of what if Kara was captured by Luthor when she arrived on Earth, but how does that explain the Krypto foster situation, which seemingly implies that Kara gave Krypto to Clark to look after for perhaps the week of where the film takes place. Some people are even saying recently, what if Supergirl's the Hammer of Baravia? And she's being controlled, but that would explain the strength that the Hammer of Baravia has in smashing Superman down to the frickin' street level. I don't know about that one. That'd be pretty nuts. But yeah, either way, Millie Alcock's Supergirl, she's probably going to be in this film. But my ideal vision of that is that she's on Earth. She's very much so trying to find herself. If anything, is in the midst of an identity crisis. She doesn't know how she fits in. She's still in a bit of culture shock. And, you know, her cousin's already Superman. He's got this identity, this you know, calling. And she's just, you know, and that's where the movie Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow gives her that calling and everything else. She finds herself. But any theories you guys have, let me know down in the comments below. Other little tidbits for Superman is that we have Rick Flag Sr. Acknowledged as the head of Argus, something we basically already knew here, but Gunn said that he works beside the Secretary of Defense, General MORE, which is why that's his through into the film, because we know that the Secretary of Defense is looking into Superman's recent actions through illegally flying into Baravia and stopping a war, which, as we know, Lois and Clark were debating about at the beginning of the trailer. So probably the Secretary of Defense is enlisted head of Argus, Rick Flag Sr., to kind of maybe look into apprehending Superman and maybe questioning him. But we also have a user saying, but will we find out why Waller isn't the head of Argus anymore? And he said in Peacemaker. Now, this really is aligning up to what I've been theorizing about for months, and how, sure, we don't have that answer as to why, well, you know, after the Creature Commandos, Waller still seemed to be the head of Argus, right? Rick Flag Sr. was her right-hand man in that, with that whole mission of protecting Princess Alana Rostovich, but we know where that ended up. But I'm thinking that with the Waller series, which, you know, we're still having yet to see how that's going along behind the scenes, but the original plan was to do this, but in Waller, maybe Waller isn't so much a public-facing figure and thus isn't the head of Argus anymore, but she could go along to create Checkmate. Just maybe. Waller would still have power. And if you're making a whole series about Waller, it's not going to just be her sat there at her couch, is it? So I do feel like she would be hustling up something new, and basically Rick Flag Sr. would just take over as the head of Argus. But the something new could like bleed out into the future DCU, originally maybe with what they were planning to possibly leading into a bit of a checkmate situation. And as for why Waller is no longer like the head of Argus, well, obviously we did have the end of Peacemaker Season 1 and where that got rolled out, but she was still the head of Argus seemingly in Creature Commandos, but she said that Congress isn't allowing them to use humans anymore for their missions, which is why they used monsters. But maybe with the whole situation with what the Bride did at the end of Creature Commandos, even though she did the right thing through preventing that future doomsday-like apocalyptic scenario where Alana Rostovich and Gorilla Grodd took over the world and killed the entire, basically, roster of the Justice League and beyond, well, maybe, given that this was just a vision, and the Bride did what she did at the end of Creature Commandos, that could still low-key cause geopolitical tensions, because, sure, the Bride did that, but where's the proof that Alana Rostovich was truly going to go on to dominate the world? I'm not saying that they can't maybe come up with the proof, but you see where I'm going with this. I wonder if, you know, the fact that maybe you have only Cersei's vision, maybe Clayface, out there as your witnesses as to why there was going to be a future apocalypse. Maybe Waller gets some backlash for why the leader of Pokolistan was taken out by one of her people. That's just another theory of mine, and why she might have had to step down, and Rick Flag Sr. is the head of Argus now, but that doesn't stop Waller from starting a whole new enterprise. Now, Wonder Woman fans, or those who are begging for Wonder Woman to be in a DCU, we had another ambiguous tease here from Gunn, from this user saying, do you have any updates on Wonder Woman? Like, please, Gunn. Yeah, apparently she's one of the 4 freaking pillar stones of the DCU, according to Zaslav: Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Supergirl. But we've had nothing. But Gunn replied, not to be shared publicly yet, but yes, encouraging. Which means he has been hustling behind the scenes to cook something up. But as I've often said on the channel, just because they haven't shared any news, it doesn't mean that there isn't news technically. It's just that they're not ready to say that yet. So behind the scenes at DC Studios, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that they could have all kinds of grand plans that we don't know about. I mean, James Gunn and Peter Safran roughly drafted out an 8 to 10 year plan for 2 chapters of DC. Obviously, that's going to include Wonder Woman at some point. I am wondering if this is going back to a post he made way back in 2023, in where I might have found the screenshot, I'm not sure, but from the top of my head, he was asked about Wonder Woman in the animated format, and he said, yes, I'm trying to get something off of the ground there over at DC Studios. One of the first things that he's tried to do. It could be that, because we've heard nothing about this Wonder Woman animated thing since years ago, since he first posted that. Nothing whatsoever. Now, has this got something to do with that, or a live action Wonder Woman? Was the animated thing going to be an Elseworlds animated Wonder Woman show, or was it going to be a DCU canonical Wonder Woman show like Creature Commandos and how that's canon to the DCU? Now, I don't know how to feel about that, because I know people are big fans of animation. I like animation. I don't cover it a whole bunch here. I really should, like Invincible and stuff. But I do feel like introducing one of the biggest characters in DC Comics through animation first rather than live action is maybe a bit strange. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but surely for one of your heavy hitters, you'd want her to appear in live action first, right? So I don't know if this is maybe leaning more towards live action. We won't know until we know, or if it's the animated thing, and if that animated thing is even canonical to the DCU. I guess my question to you would be, would you want the DCU canonical Wonder Woman to debut in live action first? Or would you not mind if she had her own thing in animated form in the DCU, just like how Shola Marduenia's Blue Beetle will eventually have, or Creature Commandos Season 2? But if this is the live action front, then maybe Gunn has got plans to introduce Diana and Wonder Woman in another thing that is cooking in the background. So people have been speculating, could we get a World's Finest? But what if that's not a World's Finest? What if it is a Trinity movie that Gunn is planning to do sometime after Superman, perhaps before Brave and the Bold? Maybe it's set after Brave. I don't know, but maybe he's come to a more firmer conclusion, and thus that's why there's an encouraging update. Again, you can really just keep going round and round in circles with this speculation, but I think a big takeaway is with Wonder Woman, similar to the Batman thing here, is that he is trying to tell people, like, don't worry, we're working on Wonder Woman. I wanted to give you this reassurance that we are trying to cook there. Do not worry. And for all those who say, oh, it's her role in Paradise Lost, I don't know about that, because Paradise Lost is set before the birth of Diana. And so it's like, okay, are you really just going to debut the DCU's Wonder Woman in live action right at the end of the series? It just, I don't know, maybe some people are saying, what if she could narrate the show? But then I just kind of think, okay, that could be cool, but do you really debut your Wonder Woman just through the form of narration for like a show set thousands of years before Diana's birth? Like, you see where I'm going with this. So I don't know if it would be for Paradise Lost, but maybe for something else that we've been speculating about already. Now, up next, guys, a little update from Gunn in the potential release order of things, which I found pretty interesting. So we had this user on Thread saying, on HBO Max, will you create a DCU timeline like how Disney Plus has one for the MCU, so you can watch in chronological order? And Gunn says, well, as of now, it's basically as movies and shows come out. Although, of course, some of these feature flashbacks, it's Creature Commandos, Superman, Peacemaker Season 2, but he's just saying Peacemaker, Lanterns, and Supergirl. So we now basically, it may have felt obvious, but we now have confirmation that Lanterns will indeed be out before Supergirl and after Peacemaker Season 2. Again, not shockingly surprising there, but it makes you think, okay, when could we see Lanterns? I suspect it will be early 2026. The reason for that is we have Superman coming out this summer, then Peacemaker in August. Lanterns is going along well, but it just wouldn't surprise me if that was a project that releases on HBO sometime early 2026. And then you have a few months in between that and Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow releases in the summer. So Lanterns could be like a January, February, maybe March-ish release. I think it might even be January, February if we're lucky. Very, very much so excited for that show. Obviously, we would get promo before then, maybe even towards the end of this year. That would be dope. Can't wait to break down that trailer. And then, speaking of DCU shows, well, we have Shola Marduenia saying and confirming here that Blue Beetle, the animated series, will start production early 2026. And this is good news because I think we heard from Safran. It might have been at that like DC Studios addressal thing where they invited all the journalists that Blue Beetle was still due at the time to have its like meeting to see whether they would get greenlit or not for actually making the animated series. So it seems like that's already been and gone, and they got the green light after that internal meeting that they had, and it's starting production early next year. So the Blue Beetle canonical DCU series is coming our way. It's actually happening, and who knows, Blue Beetle could pop up again since that animated series will be in the DCU in live action. But ladies and gentlemen, that is everything I'm going to get into in today's DC Studios News Roundup video. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to be very busy from here on out, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any breakdowns, any extra videos, bonus, you name it, news videos. We're going to be having a lot to talk about over the next year. If you're still watching right now and you haven't hit like on the video, I deeply appreciate it if you did. But until next time, everyone, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you people of the DCU in the next video. Goodbye.